Jansen Harris here with the second episode of The Final Play on the Just Good Network. Let me give you guys a quick rundown on what you should expect with Sean Fowler. We're going to be talking about the Falcons Saints MVP talk. Is Russell Wilson still in first place in that MVP race? Who knows? We're going to talk about that. NBA free agency, a lot of big-time moves going down. Unfortunately for Klay Thompson, he's out for another season. What does this mean for the Warriors? Also, are the Steelers the best team in the NFL? I talked to Jonathan Williams about that. We'll see his answer on that. Also, let's go to boxing. We're going to talk to Vinny, Coach Vinny the Vortex, about what's next for Terence Crawford. What's next for Canelo? Will he be able to beat a Caleb Smith, who's considered the best guy at 168 by many? And then there's Danny Garcia, Errol Spence Jr. Is Errol Spence still that guy? We know he was in a serious car accident. Thank God he didn't die, but that's a huge bout. We're going to be talking to Coach Vinny the Vortex about that. And finally, we'll be talking to Vince Fields again. You heard everything he had to say last week. Even after we got off the phone, he had more to say. But we're breaking down the 130-pound weight class, which is loaded with young talent. So that's the lineup we have for you guys. I'm Jansen Harris here with the Just Good Network, and you're listening to The Final Play on the Just Good Network. We have partnerships with Level 1 Game Room, who's associated with Georgia Gwinnett College. We're excited about that. And Your Future Media and the Atlanta UK Falcons are all partners of The Final Play on the Just Good Network.
Hi, I'm Ariel Allman. Follow my YouTube page, Ariel Allman, and me and Jansen's joint couple page, Ariel and Jansen, on YouTube. If you love movies and shows, look out for some of my new projects coming out in the next couple of months.
Jansen Harris here with the Final Play on the Just Good Network. Joining me is Jonathan Williams with Pinolian. He covers high school sports. He knows what he's talking about. We go back and forth a lot on Facebook. He's one of the top guys out here. Follow him actually on Facebook, Jonathan Williams on Facebook, and at JWillSports on Twitter. What's up, Jonathan?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I want to talk to you about the Steelers, and I know you made some posts about Mike Tomlin and how he's been a really good coach this year. They're 9-0, 5-0 at home, 4-0 on the road. Best team in the league record-wise. Do you view the Steelers as a Super Bowl contender?
I definitely do feel like they're a contender. I feel like once you hear 9-0, I think you definitely should be considered. Not only that, they're a really well-rounded team. They really don't really lack anything. Their players are kind of starting to get Chelsea again. Of course, Ben Roethlisberger got hurt last week, but he seems okay, and he's been having a pretty good year. And their defense has just been undeniable. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL this year, so I feel like the Steelers are a really good chance. They have a really good shot at the Super Bowl this year, just because they're very well-rounded. You cannot really find a weakness on either side of the football.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Jonathan. When I look at what they could do up front, how they rush the quarterback, I think they are the biggest threat to the Chiefs, and I would say right now they're slightly better. I know many people are going to say the Chiefs are still number one, they're the defending champions. I get that, but the Steelers haven't lost a game. They're in a brutal AFC North, which features a team like the Ravens, 6-3, Browns, 6-3, the Bengals. They could do a couple things. They're decent at home at 2-2. So I've been impressed. They're running the football well, like you said. Ben Roethlisberger, we'll see how much the injury affects him. But I agree with you, man. I think the Steelers are a Super Bowl contender. Speaking of Big Ben, do you view him as an elite quarterback this season? He has 22 touchdown passes, 4 picks, 103 quarterback rating, 66.8% completion percentage. Looks like he's the leader we're used to seeing in year 17. How do you feel about him?
Well, I feel like Big Ben is a good quarterback, but I wouldn't necessarily call him elite, only because when we see him play like maybe a top 10 defense, in my opinion, he hasn't really showed out. He played against the Titans defense, and ended the night throwing 3 interceptions, and I kind of was just not really impressed by it. I wouldn't say he's an elite, but I would say he is above average quarterback, and I think he should be getting more credit for the Steelers' success.
Absolutely. I think Big Ben, I wouldn't say he's elite right now either, but really really good. I have to see what they do with these last 7 games. But I think Big Ben, the thing about him that I like is the experience. You got a 2-time Super Bowl champion. You have a guy who's been there, done that. So when I look at him, even in 2018, yes, he threw 16 interceptions, but he had 34 touchdowns. Year before that, 28 touchdowns. Year before that, 29. So Big Ben is used to having big years. What I like about him is that he might not throw as many picks as we've seen in the past, and hopefully not, but he just has to continue leading this team, and hopefully he can stay healthy. Now, there's been a lot of breakout players this year in the NFL. Can you name a player or two, Jonathan, that you feel sticks out to you so far this season?
Yes, so I actually have 2 rookies I feel like that stood out and not really getting the credit deserved. First is the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins. I feel like he had a really great year in a really the draft factor is stacked and loaded with wide receivers. So I feel like he's not really getting the credit that he deserves. He's really been able to open up the pocket for Joe Burrow and kind of help him along with his rookie year. T. Higgins is currently 21st in wide receiving yards with 603, and also has 4 touchdowns to add along with that. I feel like if he could keep his production up a little bit more, he would have a bigger effect, unfortunately, the Bengals offense. But right now, I'm really impressed by him. And I've also been impressed by the Jaguars rookie running back, James Robinson. Also, he came in, was going to be a backup until Will Fournette left during week 1, And so far, he's kind of picked up where he left off. It's not even better. He's currently 15 yards right now and tied 9 touchdowns to 5. So I kind of like how he's going along, especially with a Jaguars O-line that hasn't been really that impressive this year. But to be on a 1-8 team and to do what James Robinson has done in his rookie year, I feel like the sky's the limit for him. And I'm very intrigued to see how he'll continue his NFL career.
Absolutely. Jonathan, man, thank you. We have to do this more often. I know we go back and forth on Facebook. You always give great commentary. Even on Twitter, man. Love the tweets. Go follow him on Twitter, Will Sports. Tweets a lot of real things. Covers high school sports. He's doing big-time things. This is one of the broadcasters you got to look out for because he's consistent. He tweets real things. He's transparent. He's a nice guy, and he loves to engage with the fan base and engage with different questions. So, Jonathan, man, thank you for joining me today. Jansen Harris here with Coach Vinny DeVortex. We're going to talk boxing. First of all, Canelo Alvarez out of his contract, usually fights in September or May. There's going to be a big fight. It's December 19th for the WBA Super Middleweight Championship of the World. I don't know how this works, but also the Ring Middleweight Championship of the World will also be defended. Don't know how much sense that makes, but Canelo Alvarez coming into the fight, 53 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws. He'll fight a Caleb Smith who's 27-0, has 19 KOs. He has the reach advantage. He has a big height advantage. Considered by many people the best guy at 168. What's your thoughts on this fight?
I'm expecting a upset. I think Smith has the reach. I think in the early rounds he's going to keep him off and keep the distance. And Canelo has to watch out for that devastating left hook.
Yeah, I think Canelo, I'm not Smith, and we just watched a couple of his fights. I think Caleb Smith, he brings a lot to the table. I think this is a worthy opponent for Canelo Alvarez. I just look at the timing. He's taking this fight about 4 weeks from now, the fight's going to happen. I don't think he's too worried about him, but I wouldn't say it's the safest fight in the world because Smith, we've seen the power. He can knock guys out. He keeps the distance. We've seen the hooks, but I think Canelo Alvarez is on a different level. I would have liked to see him fight Triple G, which potentially we could see that, or Benavidez. Maybe that'll happen. I know Benavidez was questioning him for scheduling the fight 4 weeks out. I think it is what it is. He's giving boxing fans what they want to see because they want to see Canelo Alvarez fight. And I think it could potentially be close, but I just don't see Alvarez losing. I think he's too fast for him. I think he's going to use his movement. He's going to use his footwork. And Canelo has power as well, too. But we'll see how motivated Canelo is because he was off 13 months. We know he KO'd his older brother back in 2016. Do you think there's any ring rust at all with Canelo for 13 months off? Do you like when guys sit out plus a year, a little bit over that?
I think with that long layoff, that's why I think Smith can take the early rounds. And I think also, since he has the range, he can fight up close also when he comes in with the left hook and the body shots and the uppercuts. So he's good fighting in close, and he's good keeping the distance and range. So I think that the back and forth between going in and out, I think it's just going to be too much movement for Canelo.
And Coach, I agree with you too. When I look at Smith, I agree with you. The point of Smith needs to start fast. He needs to take some of these early rounds if he's going to upset Canelo. He has to not be scared. He can't act timid early. He has to press him, put the pressure on him, do some of the things we've seen a Triple G do, where he didn't look scared of him. He was punching him in the mouth. You have to make it a dogfight, and I think that would be his best chance to win. Now, last week, let's switch subjects a little bit. We talked about Terence Crawford. We compared him to some of the older welterweights. We compared how his little punch, it didn't look that powerful, but he got the knockout victory. What do you think is next for Terence Crawford? Now, Bob Arum, he's talking about, well, we don't know what's going on. We try to make the fight with Manny Pacquiao happen. I'm losing money off of him. He's not promoting himself. Do you see Terence Crawford? What's next for him? What do you think is next for Terence Crawford?
I think probably the person that Crawford's going to probably end up fighting is Porter. Porter fights everybody.
Yeah.
And Porter's not scared of anybody. So I see Crawford fighting Porter. Porter give him a tough fight. And at the end, probably lose by an unanimous decision.
Yeah, that's the thing about Porter. I think Porter and Crawford don't want to fight each other, but I think it's going to be time that you see Crawford potentially, even though they don't want to fight each other, maybe that would be a good matchup because Porter needs the money. He needs a big fight. He's not afraid of taking big fights, and Crawford's desperate for the big fights. Now, people are talking about Manny Pacquiao could be next, but to me, why didn't that fight happen in 2014 and 15?
Yeah, I don't see Crawford fighting Pacquiao. Why would Pacquiao fight Crawford?
Maybe the big money. According to Bob Arum, the money was there, but you think it's all just...
I don't see it. I don't see them fighting. I'm not even sure who Pacquiao would fight next.
Yeah, but he has to be close to his retirement.
Yeah, I think he probably should be tired. There's no one to fight.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to prove anything to anybody.
And I think, kind of like Arum was talking about, it has everything to do with the money. So I think if Pacquiao could get the right purse for him, like a $15 or $20 million, then he could fight maybe a Spence or a Crawford. But I would love to see Crawford versus Spence. I don't know if PBC could get the job done if he goes inside with Al Heyman, or according to Bob Arum, this ESPN Plus thing would mean even more pay-per-view buys. So he says it'd be in the best interest of everybody if they could make the fight happen together. But I think the pandemic, they're going to have to put the pandemic behind it. I think that's with a lot of big fighters. A lot of big fighters didn't really want to take the top-notch fights because they want the fans. They want all the money. And in this pandemic, which I think, going back to Canelo, why he got out of his deal is he's not making the type of money that he would make prior to the pandemic, wanting to demand $30, $35 million for fights that aren't going to be fully crowded, so you can't even sell out the arena. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's talk about Danny Garcia. He won his last two fights. He's 36-2. He lost to Sean Porter, lost to Keith Thurman. Do you think he has any shot against a guy like Errol Spence Jr.? We know Errol Spence, he's coming off that win against Porter last September on pay-per-view. Many thought he looked impressive. I thought he got hit a little bit too much, but he ground and pounded and got the win. So a win's a win. Do you see Porter potentially getting upset at Danny Garcia? He says it's a different him now, that he's not the same fighter. He's humbled, and he's ready to take this victory December 5th.
Garcia is one of my favorite fighters. I like how he throws his jabs and his hooks. Everything's like picture perfect. But the problem is he doesn't throw enough. He gets in these fights with these top fighters, and at the end he always loses because at the end he doesn't throw enough. They're competitive fights, but at the end he always loses.
You think Garcia needs to potentially think, okay, I need to knock this guy out. I need to test if he's the same guy prior to that car accident?
Well, I think he needs to put the pressure on in the early rounds, not to try to knock him out, just put the pressure on him. Because if he tries to knock him out and it doesn't work out, then Garcia is going to be in trouble in the later rounds. So I think Garcia should put the pressure on him, get a big lead, and hopefully he'll do enough in the later rounds to win the fight. But I'm thinking that Garcia, at the end of the day, is going to lose. There's probably a split decision or maybe an unanimous decision, but it's going to be a good fight and Garcia losing.
And when I look at Garcia, the Porter fight, that could have went either way. I know his dad was talking about he got robbed in both fights. I thought the Keith Thurman fight, Keith Thurman was a little bit more aggressive. He didn't do enough, and he wasn't as offensive as you said. Now, saying that, let's go back to Angel Garcia, his dad. He seems overly confident that this is a fight they could win. Do you think he's just trying to boost the numbers, the pay-per-view numbers, and it's all talk? Or do you think there's something Danny Garcia's camp knows about Errol Spence and they see a weakness?
I just think the father's just talking, trying to, I don't know, think people that trying to make people think that Garcia has a chance. I don't think Garcia has a chance. I know it's going to be a close fight. Like I said before, Garcia doesn't throw enough punches.
Absolutely. Now, I look at Errol Spence. When we were watching the interviews with Fox, he looked very calm, like he's sure he's going to get the win. Do you see that? Do you think that's part of the right strategy, not talking so much, hyping the fight up? Do you like when guys do that, or do you think he should be more trash talkish, kind of like how Angel Garcia was?
Well, you know what? You don't have to talk. If you could just back it up in the ring. So he's probably just keeping his focus. You know, sometimes these guys, they talk a little too much and they kind of lose their focus. They get a little too excited, you know. But I think, no, if you know you're going to win, you don't have to talk. Just be calm.
Yeah, you know me. I like those cocky guys. Guys go out there and talk. But one thing I do like about Errol Spence Jr. is he tells you what he's going to do and he does it. I remember he fought. He tells guys prior to fights, he's like, look, I'm just going to outbox this guy, and he does it. And then he said he was going to go in there with Porter, and he said it was going to be a mashup fight on the inside, and that's what he did. So that's what I like about Spence. I think if Spence gets by Garcia, this brings him even closer to the big fight he wants against Crawford. Do you think that fight happens in 2021? You think these guys are going to keep ducking?
I don't know. Crawford should have been fighting some of these fighters before, you know, like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. You know, Porter fights top fighters. Crawford doesn't.
Yeah, and that was the guy that just came back to my head, Mikey Garcia. So he was going to outbox Mikey Garcia. Errol Spence, he jumped up a couple weight classes, but he had to jump up a couple weight classes. I'm not saying Errol Spence has to beat guys, but I think both those fighters need each other. That's the fight boxing needs to see. I think boxing needs to see those fights. It needs to happen ASAP. Hopefully it gets done. There's a lot of politics in boxing, but we'll see. We'll see. But I think in the next year and a half, those fights can happen. But back to the Danny Garcia fight. This is a must-win for Danny Garcia.
Garcia has to win this fight. You know, he has to win it. But I don't see him winning. I see him doing what he always does. Get somebody a tough fight and lose at the end.
Absolutely. Thank you, Coach Vinny the Vortex. Guys, go see his content online. He's from the Real Dig Boxing Gym. He does training classes all the time inside and outside the ring. Also going to be doing virtual training as well. I'm Jansen Harris with the Just Good Network. That's Coach Vinny the Vortex.
The network. This segment is brought to you by Level 1 Game Room and Your Future Media. For all media purposes, Your Future Media. Who are the top guys at 130 and 135 in boxing right now? Here's my top 5. I know this list could change drastically in months depending on who fights who, and it's hard to judge these guys because of the lack of competition or what we project is going to happen in the division. But here's number 1. Number 1, I got Teofimo Lopez, 16-0, 12 KOs. His win over Vasily Lomachenko, his win over Comey to win the belt against him. He deserves the number 1 spot. Lomachenko was the pound-for-pound guy, one of the top guys in the world at that weight class. He wasn't scared of him. He accepted the challenge. He dared to be great. And what happened? Teofimo Lopez was successful. Some people want to say, oh, well, if they have a rematch, Lomachenko would win. But I look at it like this. At the end of the day, he had a game plan. He was aggressive. He cut the ring off. He was not scared. He was a fighter who wasn't intimidated, and he won, and that's why he's number 1 on my list. He's top 5 pound for pound in the world, if you ask me, because this young champion who has all the belts, he fought the best. When other guys out there didn't want to fight the best, they made excuses. They were on social media, they were on Instagram, they were on Facebook, they talked a big game but didn't want to fight. Teofimo Lopez wanted to fight. He used his right hand. He used his left hand. He was the quicker guy. He was the stronger guy. He was the better guy. At the end of the day, he won that fight. Loma looked uncomfortable in the beginning of the fight, middle of the rounds. He still looked uncomfortable. That slow start came back and bit him in the behind. That's why Teofimo Lopez is number 1 on my list, 16-0, 12 KOs. Number 2, we were just talking about him, Vasily Lomachenko. I have Loma at number 2. Why do I have him at number 2? Because he's still a dangerous fighter. I think if there's a rematch in this fight, it's another 50-50 fight. I think Loma could learn from his mistakes. He still is 14-2. He still has 10 KOs. He still has Campbell in his record. Linares, Rigondeaux, the big fighters. Gary Russell Jr. These are all guys he's beat, so don't sleep on Loma or think he's finished. I think he wants the rematch. If there's a rematch, it should be on pay-per-view. Bob Arum could make it happen. I know Lopez has said numerous times that he doesn't want the rematch, and Loma's making excuses, and he needs to just admit as a man he lost, and I agree. He needs to admit a man he lost. Maybe he was injured coming into the fight, but at the end of the day, he could have pulled out the fight. They could have rescheduled, and he didn't. So I'll just leave it at that. Number 3, I had Gervonta Davis, simply because of the win over Leo Santa Cruz on pay-per-view, Showtime pay-per-view. Mayweather Promotions, they talked a big game, and they backed it up. I seen a fight where Leo Santa Cruz in that round, before he was knocked out in that 6th round, he was landing punches. You've seen some swelling around the eye of Gervonta Davis. And Gervonta Davis, before the end of the round, and the broadcasters were kind of trying to turn against him and talk against him. What'd he do? He landed that hook. He knocked him out. He's one of the most exciting fighters we see in the sport right now. Give him his credit. He's proved the haters and doubters wrong. He came into the fight. He came into the fight in shape. He came into the fight ready. He came into the fight prepared for 12 rounds. He showed everybody the power is real, and he could knock out top guys like Leo Santa Cruz. Don't get things wrong. Leo Santa Cruz is not washed up. Leo Santa Cruz, maybe he wasn't as good as he was a couple years ago, but there's no excuse. It was still a prime Leo Santa Cruz. So Gervonta Davis is at number 3. Number 4, I have Miguel Burchell, 37-1, 33 KOs. I made a video about this a little bit earlier today. 16-0 since being KO'd in 2014. I respect him. When he got knocked out by Luis El Dorado Flores, he could have packed it in. He could have gave up, but he didn't do that. He fought through it. He was the type of fighter that wasn't discouraged, continued his path. 2017, remember, super featherweight champion, and is still the champion. So we can't sleep on Miguel Burchell. He said it himself best, that some of the greatest fighters in the world, Pacquiao, Muhammad Ali, and the list goes on, Joe Frazier, they've taken L's, they've lost fights, okay? But you still can come back. You still can be one of the best fighters in the world. He's been champion since 2017. We can't overlook that. Oscar Valdez, we know he got COVID in Burchell, but he'll be seeing Oscar Valdez in a fight. So we'll see if he is still the best in the division. Many people have him still ranked at number 1 in Boxing Rec, ESPN, number 1 in that division. So we'll see how that works out. Right now, he's in the 4th spot. We know this guy's coming after him. We know Shakur Stevenson wants to fight at 130. So we'll see how that goes. Number 5, have Devin Haney. I think Devin Haney has power. He has quickness. He has the skill. Has he been in the ring with the guys we want to see yet? No, we have not seen that. But at the end of the day, 25-0, 15 KOs. Look good against Gamboa. He showed you defense. He showed you offense. He showed you his quickness. A lot of people think overall he's the best fighter, best young fighter. We're going to have to see. He's called out some of the big names. I don't know if some of the big names ducked him or he ducked them. It's kind of hard to tell in boxing because guys say a lot of things. But at the end of the day, he's still undefeated. He's still calling out the top guys. Look, I remember seeing him and Gervonta Davis Instagram Live. He was calling out Davis to get on the Instagram Live video, but he was just saying in the chat talking. They were talking about money. They were kind of going back and forth and stuff like that. I think hyping up a potential fight. Even though I don't think they're going to fight, I think it's all like news, social media stuff, getting their profile up. I don't see this fight happening anytime soon. But it was good to see Haney keep his confidence. Haney call out the top guys, calling out Teofimo Lopez, who has made fun of him and called him a paper champ. Yeah, he's the youngest champion in 23 years, but they gave him the belt. So it's great to see these young guys talking. Hopefully they can get into the ring. We'll see about that. We'll see. But those are my top 5 guys I have at 130 and 135. I'm Jansen Harris with the final play. This segment, again, is presented by Level 1 Game Room and Your Future Media for all media purposes. I'm Jansen Harris. Jansen Harris here with the final play on the Just Good Network. I told you guys I'll have Vince Fields back to talk boxing. He's here to give his top 5 guys at 130 or 135-ish. Somewhere around that bracket, because these guys kind of move up and down as they please. Vince, who are your top 5 guys right now in those weight divisions?
So at 130, 135, it's a cluster, because you have, obviously, you have your Gervonta Tank Davis, you have Devin Haney, you have Teofimo Lopez, you also have Shakur there, and it's a couple of other guys. You have Tevin Farmer, who's sitting at 130, but they all fluctuate between 130 to no higher than about 140. So it's going to be interesting, because they all have different fights coming. But Teofimo Lopez just recently did an interview calling out Gervonta Tank Davis, even going as far as saying he would take a pay cut. He just wants to fight.
Wow. That's impressive. That's impressive. We'll see if that actually happens. That'd be awesome.
But it's going to be interesting, because you have your guys like your Ryan Garcias and so on and so forth. But you have to see who holds what belt and who's managed by who, because this is why a lot of these fights aren't being made.
Absolutely. I know it's a lot of guys to choose from. Who do you got at 5?
At 5, I would put Tevin Farmer there.
Okay.
Even though he's coming off a loss, it was a decision loss, 12 round. But previously he's a title holder, and I have him at 5.
Okay. I know that was a tough one, and Tevin Farmer, to me, he was one of the big threats to Tank Davis. I remember he was calling him out for years. Who do you got at number 4?
I have, believe it or not, and it's a name that was not mentioned, but Mr. Gary Russell.
Okay. Gary Russell. A lot of people want to fight Gary Russell, and some people think he's ducking, but we'll see how 2020 finishes, and 2021 should be a big year in boxing. Who do you have at number 3?
I have Teofimo Lopez at 3.
Wow. Now, a lot of people will think that's too low. Why do you have him at 3?
I have him at 3 because he only has 12 fights.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense that he hasn't been doing it in a long time, and he still needs that experience. Big win against Loma. So who comes in at number 2 for you?
At 2, I have Devin Haney.
Devin Haney at number 2. Big time
And I
fight.
but I have him at 2 because he showed me great improvement. He's
what I needed to see. He showed me in the Gamboa fight that even though he didn't get the knockout, that he could control a fight. So that's why I have him at 2.
Makes a lot of sense. And who is your number one guy on your list? A tough list.
On this tough list, I have Gervonta Tank Davis sitting at number 1.
I just want to throw in a little bonus question. Who would you say is next? Next for Gervonta Davis, realistically, in 2021?
2021, I see 3 fights possibly if they can get the red tape out of the way. I can see him fighting Teofimo Lopez if they can coordinate the times, because if you notice, Tank is tending to fight around the same time frame that Floyd used to fight, which is only 2 to 3 times a year.
Okay, we'll see.
I could also see him fighting Devin Haney to unify that weight class and be the undisputed champ with no questions. I can see that one happening.
Jansen Harris here with the final play on the Just Good Network. Joining me is Flynn Heathcliff with Level 1 Game Room. So that is one of our partners as well, too. We're going to be talking about NBA. Gordon Hayward, let's get right to it. Gordon Hayward, he signed a 4-year deal worth $120 million contract. That's the total money on that one. With the Hornets, do you think he's worth it?
At first, I did not, but now that I'm thinking it over, I'm mulling it over. I think if Gordon Hayward can stay healthy, he's the perfect player for this team. They needed someone who has some type of playoff pedigree, an experienced player, someone who can take them to the next level. Now, does Gordon Hayward make them a championship level team? No. Does he make them a second round playoff team? No. But I do feel like Gordon Hayward, depending on how well LaMelo turns out, could make this team a fringe playoff team. And the Hornets love being a fringe playoff team. Gordon Hayward gives them some decent defense, gives them secondary playmaking. He's a decent passer. He has some length, so you can put him at the 3 or the 4. He's pretty versatile. So yeah, I think this Gordon Hayward thing is a good signing as long as he stays healthy. And plus, the Hornets aren't going to get any big free agents. Let's be honest. In this next free agency class, they're not in it for the big guys. No one wants to play in Charlotte. So getting someone like Gordon Hayward for a lengthy contract, as long as he's healthy, it's a good deal.
Yeah, that's the number one thing. You said it right there, is Gordon Hayward and his health. Can he stay healthy? Do I think he's worth $120 million at this point? No. I think Boston, they should be happy about finally getting him off the books because he just didn't fit there. He was holding back their young players. Now, him with the Hornets, he's going to be expected to be as good as he was in Utah, plus a little bit more. But when I look at this Hornets team, they got a couple players, Miles Bridges, Devontae Graham, who at the end, he tore it up. He was really putting in buckets. So when you got guys like that, P.J. Washington, Hayward's going to have to go there, see some of these young guys, and be like, look, how can I help make them better? They have Marvin Lewis. Marvin Lewis is on the team. So when you look at this team, they have talent there. Terry Rozier, they got talent there. LaMelo Ball, how good he's going to be. Does Hayward make them a 9th, 8th seed type of team is the question. And he could do that if he stays healthy, if he's willing to be a leader, because there's a bunch of young talent on this team that just needs that one leader that they could flourish under. Why did they get rid of Kemba Walker? Maybe he just wanted to leave, but Kemba Walker, to me, could have been that leader, and then you would have maybe brought in a guy like Gordon Hayward, but we can't talk about that. It's hard for the Hornets to kind of mass players together because nobody wants to play there. A lot of people think they draft badly, but the good thing for them is drafting a LaMelo Ball, who is probably the most popular pick they could draft. You have him, you have Gordon Hayward. If Ball turns out to be a star-level player, you'll probably be able to build off of Hayward and maybe bring in another big guy or maybe a little bit under a star type of player again. So I don't know if I like the deal. I'm not saying I like it. I like it if LaMelo Ball is pretty good, if some of these other guys step up and play their roles and they feel inspired by a Gordon Hayward. So I like it if Hayward is there to be a leader. And I don't know if he's a leader. I really don't know what he did in Boston, really. At times it didn't look like he fit. It didn't look like he belonged in Boston. And then he had the injury. So a lot of people look at him, oh, he's stealing money. But I know he has something to prove. So he's going to have that chip on his shoulder. I hope the best for him, but we're going to see what happens with that. Let's move on to Klay Thompson. Achilles injury. He'll miss another season. How big of an injury is that for the Warriors when you look at it?
First off, health and wishes go out to Klay Thompson and his journey. I know it's going to be another long year for him as he rehabs and gets back into game shape. But I think the Warriors, their ceiling went from championship contenders to serious playoff contenders. Now, they made some moves. Someone who watched the Warriors last year when Steph went down, when Klay went down, when D'Lo was traded. I mean, the season was basically over when Steph went down. The thing that people don't acknowledge about the Warriors and all those championship Warriors teams is, yeah, they had a lot of guys on the top, but they had strength in numbers, especially the first championship season. They had a lot of guys coming off the bench. Sean Livingston, everybody knows about Iggy, but Spates, Barbosa, like the others for the Warriors could step up and play their role, and they excelled in that role because they were just great role players. You know, they just did everything they needed to do, and Steve Kerr is a great offensive mind, so he knows how to put players in the right position to succeed.
Absolutely.
I think they made some pretty decent signings, free agency-wise. Brad Wanamaker's a decent point guard. He's probably the most average point guard in the NBA. Which may be okay for the Warriors. You got a guy, Ken Bazemore's back on the team. He's at his peak. He's a decent 3-and-D wing.
His peak was pretty much with Golden State.
Well, I mean,
really
with the Hawks, he was decent on the Hawks. He hasn't really been that much since. But if he can be a 3-and-D guy, maybe guard one of the best opposing wings off the bench,
I think he can give a spark to that.
He can give a spark. But obviously, the biggest move was Kelly Oubre and James Wiseman. Now, I think Oubre is going to be a great piece. If you look at the starting lineup, you have Steph, who's about 6'3", Oubre 6'7", Wiggins 6'7", 6'8", Draymond 6'7", and Wiseman, who's around 7 feet tall. So you still have length, you still have switchability, you still have versatility in the starting lineup, and you get Oubre, who can shoot. Now, he's not as good of a shooter as Klay Thompson, but he can shoot, he can stretch the floor. I think the thing with the Warriors this year is chemistry and their bench are the two main things to focus on. I know a lot of people are talking about Steph's health and can Draymond return to old form, and yeah, of course that's important, but the biggest thing with this team is chemistry and their bench, their depth.
I'm glad you brought that up, because first, let's talk about Klay. Even last season, 2 seasons ago against Toronto, before he even got injured, they were looking like they were going to win that game and push it to a 7th game. So that's what it was looking like in that series. Ever since he got hurt, they haven't been the same team. And then you saw Steph Curry not playing last year with the ankle. Now, I look at Klay Thompson being hurt. This hurts their championship cause, because now the guy they have to rely on the most is Kelly Oubre, who maybe he's capable, 24-year-old, like you said, he could shoot, had averaged about 18 points last year. He could score, and I think he'll flourish under Steph Curry. Steph Curry's leadership is going to be tested this year, how he's going to deal with some of these young guys, and Draymond Green, how he's going to deal with some of these young guys, and looking at a James Wiseman, his rookie season, helping him out. So if Wiseman can step up, Oubre can step up, guys like that, Steph Curry could be that 30-point guy, 7-8 assist guy like we're used to seeing, then you could see a team like the Warriors potentially still make the playoffs. That's where I think we're at with that. But with losing Klay Thompson, I didn't think they were a championship contender before with Kevin Durant leaving, but definitely don't see them advancing, especially in the Western Conference, into the second round. This is a team that's going to be contending for a 9th, 8th playoff spot at best. I wouldn't be surprised, though, in the beginning of the season if the Warriors start off hot. Oh, the Warriors are the 4th seed right now, or the 5th seed, depending on how Oubre plays. But it starts with Steph Curry, his leadership. Then Draymond Green and his leadership, and now he's going to help these guys out. And then I'll throw in a third guy, Steve Kerr. His coaching, hands-on approach, a guy who has 3 championships as a coach. He's been there, done that. He took that team in 2015 from a playoff team to a championship team. So his coaching experience is going to play a big part. A big part. And then Wiggins. What's Wiggins going to do? Wiggins needs to do something. Wiggins is going to have to do something as well, too. How does he fit?
I think the thing with the Warriors is they have so many. You look at the Klay Thompson injury and you say they're not championship contenders. But if you really watch this team play last year, they have so many X factors, so many people on the team, especially now with James Wiseman, who can really take this team combined, can really take this team to a whole nother level. I'm looking at guys like Jordan Poole, who's already making big improvements in training camp. He's getting stronger. His shot looks way better. He looks like he could potentially be the secondary ball or a ball handler off the bench. He's 6'4", so he has decent height if you wanted to play point guard. You got Damian Lee, who's shooting the lights out. He's not afraid to shoot. Yeah, he's only 6'5". He's not a great defender, but someone off the bench who can put up points. People forget Eric Pascal. I'm a big fan of Eric Pascal, especially this year if he can become more consistent with his three-point shot and better in perimeter defense. They could still have a depth lineup. That's Curry, Oubre, Wiggins, Pascal, and Draymond. That's a depth lineup. Now, yeah, you don't have KD in there, you don't have Klay in there, but you can still switch across multiple positions. You still have pretty decent spacing. And then you throw in Marquis Chris, who was one of the most improved players last year, who didn't get that much attention. He's good at passing. He's good at rim running. He's good at defense. He's not the best center in the world, but shoot, coming off the bench or even starting, he's great. He's going to be catching hella lobs from Draymond Green and Steph Curry. And the last guy's Andrew Wiggins. Always been a 20-point scorer. Now, he's playing with the most talented team, and even without Klay Thompson, the most talented team he's ever played with right now, the best coaching that he's ever going to experience, or that he has experienced in his career right now. So we're really going to see how good Andrew Wiggins is. But Andrew Wiggins still has the potential, especially now, playing alongside Draymond and Steph, to be a very versatile defender. Someone who you can put on, and I'm not saying he's going to stop them, but put on the opposing wings like Kawhi Leonard and LeBron James and Kevin Durant, like these guys. You don't expect him to, of course, take them out the game, but someone you can put on them who has size, who has the athletics, someone who can run in transition, someone who can handle the ball while Steph is off ball, going off screens. You have a guy who can really take the Warriors to another level. He can score 20, 25 if he really shows up, especially with Klay not taking his shots. Watch for Andrew Wiggins this year. Watch for him.
Okay. Well said. One more thing before we close out that segment. Warriors, what's the ceiling for them? How good do you think they're going to be next year? What's the record or playoff spot? Do you think they're a playoff team?
So we'll start with the floor. So I think the Warriors' floor, they're definitely a playoff team with Steve Kerr. I feel like people don't give enough credit for coaches in the NBA and how great coaching can lead to great teams or teams really exceeding their expectations. But I think the Warriors' floor right now is 6th or 7th seed in the West. I think their ceiling is the 3rd seed, but most likely they'll be a 4th or 5th seed, and this is all hopefully without any more injuries, but they have more depth now. So I do think they're better than a team like the Nuggets, the Rockets. They did make some additions, so we'll have to see. But I think the Warriors on paper are better than the Nuggets.
Okay. Cool. Let's talk about the hometown Hawks here. Atlanta Hawks expected to make the playoffs. We'll see what Lord Pierce can do with this squad. Bogdanovich, that's a big-time signing. He was a guy with the Kings who could shoot the three-point shot, make a lot of jumpers, get to the basket at times. Wasn't his strong point, but he did it at times. Was like a 17-point guy. I think this is a pretty good addition offensively. I don't know if he's bringing much defensively, but he could score the basketball. How do you feel about that signing?
So the Hawks may have had the best offseason in the NBA. Mark my words, the best offseason in the NBA, because they've had so many needs this past season. They needed a secondary ball handler. They needed more perimeter defense. They needed more interior defense. They needed really kind of everything. If you look at it, besides maybe, like a number one offensive option and maybe like a number two offensive option in John Collins. So they really needed just about everything. But they needed more help. They needed depth. And I feel like they got that. They signed so many guys. Bogdan was a great signing. Gallinari was a great signing. Both of these guys give him shooting and size. You got Rondo on the team, who's perfect for secondary ball handling because Rondo loves the ball in his hands. And now you have two of what I think are the top 10 passers in the game on your team. You have one starting, and you have one coming off the bench who can lead the second unit. And not only that, you drafted a Okongwu at 6, which I feel like is a perfect fit. Especially if he's able to develop a jumper and shoot from the outside.
And let's talk about Okongwu. What is Okongwu going to bring? We know you've been talking about him. We talked off camera a little bit about his defense, his defensive presence, and the ceiling and the potential you think he has. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you were telling me off camera about him?
So Okongwu is 6'9". He's around 245. His wingspan is above 7 feet. If that's correct, I believe his wingspan is above 7 feet. So he's very mobile. So he should be able to guard multiple positions. I'm sure he'll be able to guard 4s and some 5s right away. Maybe not the elite 5s like Joel Embiid and Jokic. Maybe not those type of guys, but he'll still be able to guard most 5s in the league and a lot of 4s. But I do feel like his potential, he's going to be able to guard multiple positions. At least 3s, 4s, and 5s. I feel like the ceiling for Okongwu is to guard 3, 4s, and 5s. He should be great in pick-and-roll defense, depending on the coverage. I feel like he'll be great in drop coverage because he has a long wingspan and he's very agile. Overall, I feel like he's a good defender. He gets blocks. Sometimes he gets beat, but he's really agile. He's really athletic. So I feel like he's going to be a great defender, especially next to learning from a guy like Clint Capella, who's been one of the top rim protectors in the league the past few years. He'll be able to fit right next to John Collins if Collins is playing the 4. Put Okongwu at the 5. You still have a lot of size on the interior, and I still feel like he's going to be a great player for them. Great addition.
Absolutely, and he brings that toughness. I think this Hawks team, they lack toughness. Him and Clint Capella, which we're finally going to be able to see Clint Capella play because he had that toe injury. Hopefully it's nothing huge or the Hawks made a mistake. Travis Schlenk, if that toe was really a huge problem, maybe that's what Houston also saw in him and made them want to ship him off. But let's talk about Rajon Rondo and his impact. I think Rajon Rondo is going to bring that right type of veteran leadership, being a multiple-time champion, winning with Boston, winning with the Lakers. He brings the right maturity to the team. Not saying Vince Carter didn't, but Vince Carter really wasn't even that good, or shouldn't even really been in the league when he was on the Hawks. I think he played the mentor role, but Rondo's going to play the mentor role, but he actually could still ball. He actually could probably be a starting point guard on another team. He is that piece, I think, that could bring them to the next level, potentially into the playoffs, if there's no crazy injuries. How do you feel about Rajon Rondo and some of these young guys on the team?
I think Rondo is the perfect addition to this team because Rondo allows Trey to play more off ball, kind of in the Steph Curry role where, Steph's running off a whole bunch of screens and Draymond's holding the ball or who's ever holding the ball when they're passing it. I think that'll allow Trey to, when they're both on the court, of course, Trey to cut more off screens, have more guys cutting. I feel like the people who will benefit most from Rondo being on this team, especially since Rondo's going to be coming off the benches, Okongwu, Herter, Hunter, and John Collins, Clint Capella. Rondo gives a lot. He brings a lot to the table as a floor general, and I think Rondo's a good defender too. We're talking about playoff Rondo, of course. Regular season Rondo, not so much. But playoff Rondo is going to bring some intensity that the Hawks don't have. When you look across their roster, they don't have playoff experience, championship pedigree. He's going to give them a lot of defense. He's going to give them passing. He's going to give them a secondary ball handler. He's going to give them somebody who can play important minutes in the playoffs. He's going to give them leadership. And I think they're going to need a lot of leadership because I'm not a big fan of Lloyd Pierce. I still feel like he's very young, and we'll see what he does. But I do believe Rondo was a good signing for this team.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit about Gallinari, and he's kind of a vet now, right? 3-year contract, $61 million. Do you think that's too much for him? I think it might be a little bit too much for him. It smells like it to me. I'm not saying he can't ball, but was he even needed on this team? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this is hinting towards the John Collins trade that everybody's talking about, because I don't think they needed him, because he's not going to help you with that defense. But maybe some leadership, a vet in there who knows what they're doing, which he is. He's a baller. He could shoot the three-point shot. He could score in many ways. I've seen him do it many times, be a 20-point guy. Not much of a defender at all, though. How do you feel about his contract?
I think Gallinari was a good signing, especially if John Collins is out the door, because he fits in perfectly at the 4. The whole thing with this team is really the lineups. So they got perimeter. They got guys who could defend on the perimeter. Tony Snell, Chris Dunn. Hopefully, DeAndre Hunter becomes a great perimeter defender. You got Rondo, Kongwu, Capella. But if you look at the starting 5, the projected started 5, it's Trae Young, Bogdan, Gallinari, John Collins, and Clint Capella. Like, yeah, you get the interior defense on Clint Capella, but outside of that, you don't have too many defenders in the starting lineup. Now, Gallinari's going to give you another player who can shoot, who's a pretty dang good shooter, even when someone's in his face. Someone who could run pick and pop with Trae or Rondo or even Bogdan in the starting lineup. Someone who has size, like 6'10". He has a lot of length. He's not the best defender, but he's a pretty good team defender. He's pretty good at help defense. And he's a good passer. And I feel like that's gonna help the team. Now the contract, 3 years, you said 3 years, $61 million. I feel like it's a lot, especially with this free agency, because you never really know who the Hawks could attract. But you just have to look at their books for next year and see. But I still feel like he's a good fit despite the contract.
Okay, thank you, Flynn Heathcliff, for joining me and breaking down some of these free agent moves. I have to ask you though, man, before we go, you know I have to touch over them. Let's talk about Montrezl Harrell a little bit. Montrez going from the Clippers to the Lakers. Did he break code with doing that?
I think
he broke code to me. I'm sorry. I gotta say, before I even give you the question, I'm not supposed to do this. He broke code because everybody thinks he's gonna go back to the Clippers. He's gonna help this team get to potentially the Western Conference Finals next year, even though they should have won this year, and then potentially a championship. Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, we have the best bench, this, then. Bang! Lakers, Montrezl Harrell. Wow. What are your thoughts on that move?
So, I'm going to start from the Clippers' point of view first. And I'm not high on Montrezl Harrell. I'm really not high on Montrezl Harrell at all. Because what is the one thing that Montrezl Harrell does that's great? I'm still waiting. So I feel like the Clippers actually upgraded their front court depth, getting rid of Harrell and signing Ibaka, because Ibaka brings them a whole new dimension to that team. Someone who can play the 5, someone who's, he's not the most mobile guy on defense, can't really switch across positions, but he is a little bit mobile for a 5, and he can shoot. And he's going to stretch the floor if he plays 5. And even sometimes playing the 4, if you have to go big against the Lakers, he's going to stretch the floor. He's going to give Kawhi more space in the paint. He's going to give Paul George more space in the paint. Lou Will more space. It'll give Lou Will someone to do pick and pop with. And you didn't have that in Montrez. And Ibaka's taller. Ibaka's bigger. Ibaka's a bigger body than Montrezl Harrell. So I feel like the Clippers upgraded, but that's just from the Clippers' point of view. As for the Lakers, you get an energy guy. You get a very high energy guy. Someone who can score, and you could tell I'm not a big fan of Montrezl Harrell, but
I could tell.
Someone who can score in the paint, but I don't think Montrezl Harrell. I would still rather have Dwight and JaVale McGee than Montrezl Harrell.
I only disagree because
in combination, not one or the other,
okay,
but in combination, JaVale and Dwight.
I'm actually happy they got rid of both of them because of the Marc Gasol signing.
Well, I watched Marc Gasol in the playoffs last year
he's that washed
against the Celtics. I think Marc's a little washed. Maybe it was because he had a heavy off season playing in the tournament and finals, and then he played for Spain, I believe, and then he came back and played a season with the Raptors. So he was gassed, but at the same time, Marc Gasol isn't the most agile guy. Now, if his only role is to play interior defense and shoot wide open threes, good signing. Now, if you expect him to do more than that, I don't know if you're going to get that. And with Montrez, what is Montrez supposed to do? Run? I guess he's going to be running second units with Schroeder, and hopefully that's Lou Will and Montrez part 2. I don't know. That's what you're hoping. Now, the Lakers outside of Trez and Gasol made some pretty good signings, so like they're in good shape. But the Montrez move is a little.
And let's talk about their other signings. Let's talk about Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder was having a pretty good season with OKC. I don't know why they got rid of him. I thought he's a pretty good young player. When he was on the Hawks. Right. But for some reason that didn't work out. He could bring a scoring spark to this team. They got rid of Rajon Rondo. I wanted Rondo to be back with the Lakers, but it is what it is. I think they upgraded in that area. Schroeder's a guy who could come in with the second team or maybe first team. You know how these guys like to adjust their lineups and stuff, try to get fancy. But I think Frank Vogel sees the vision. He looks at a guy who potentially could be their third guy. That's how much he produces. He could shoot. He could get to the basket. He give you the spark. His passing's all right. I think he plays alongside a guy like Anthony Davis, LeBron James. He's going to feel more confident. He's going to be even better because now he knows, because he's never been in this position before, that he's on a championship team and has the ability to actually work towards winning a championship. You can say a lot of guys are like that, but I think Dennis Schroeder, he's seen his fair share of losing with the Hawks. People calling him overrated. Then he goes to OKC, and they're not winning, but they had a pretty productive year last year. You saw what he could do with Chris Paul, who was probably hard on him, but is a really good player, and he probably needed that mentally. And now he's with LeBron James. Even better. So he potentially could be like one of the top passers on the team. Maybe he'll get more out of Kuzma. Yeah. I'm kind of surprised they didn't try to move Kuzma, but that's my take on Schroeder.
No one wants Kuzma. But I think Schroeder's, it's almost funny that Rondo's gone and they get him, because a lot of people were comparing him and Rondo in the first place, like especially when he first came out in the draft. They said he's the next Rondo. He's like Rondo light. But he definitely gives, I feel like he fills a lot of the needs for the Lakers. He's a third ball handler, third scorer, spark off the bench. He had a pretty good season defensively last year. He's learned a lot from playing with Chris Paul, I'm sure. He doesn't have really no responsibilities on that team. Like, he doesn't have any hard burdens on his shoulders. He just needs to come in and just play and do his thing, really, especially if he's anchoring the second unit. He has Trez as his second unit center, or Marc Gasol, which gives him spacing. So he has a lot more weapons than he had on OKC. So he's a great signing, but I feel like an undercover move, a slept-on move that the Lakers made was signing Wes Matthews, someone who 3-and-D guy. He's only 6'4", 6'5". He's 220 plus, so he's gonna be able to guard a lot of guys. I saw him guard LeBron last year and did pretty well on him.
From Denver, right?
No, from the Bucks, from Milwaukee. He's a great player. Torrey Craig is the one you're thinking of. He's on the Bucks. But Wes Matthews, 3-and-D guy, someone who can hit a wide open shot and defend multiple positions. So that's a great signing for them as well.
Absolutely. I got that little mix up, but he was part of the reason why some of their wings, they had some of the best blocks and a lot of steals from them, and that was Matthews. He doesn't get enough credit because people don't care about defense too much, unfortunately, at least fan bases, but coaches do. And Frank Vogel, he's known to build big-time defenses. With this Lakers team, and even before this Lakers team, you saw in Indiana. Do you look at the Lakers as the favorite coming in with some of the moves they made going into the new season? You think the Lakers could win back-to-back?
Definitely. Because I feel like with the players last year, they only made improvements outside of maybe Montrezl Harrell, or maybe that's me just being too pessimistic. But on paper, they made nothing but improvements. You bring in Marc Gasol, he can stretch the floor, still play defense. Montrezl Harrell is a guy who averaged, 18, 20 last year off the bench. You bring in Schroeder, who can score better than anybody on the Lakers bench last year. You bring in Wesley Matthews, who may not be the defender that Danny Green is, may not have the size, but is arguably a more consistent shooter than he is. Someone who can hit corner shots. So you really only made improvements. Hopefully Kuzma's better next year. You added more size. The Lakers
And let me tell you something about Kuzma. Just because y'all won a championship doesn't mean I'm going to get you off the hook, Kuzma. We're going to be talking about this all year long. Kuzma is supposed to be that third star.
Kuzma's 5 now on the list. He's 5. So
he's 5.
If he
Kuzma needs to have a
5,
better. He needs to have a better year overall. If he even wants to think about getting some money on a contract, like Kuzma's gonna have to step up, because if they start noticing Kuzma's not that guy and they're trying to move him, he might get moved for cheap or draft picks or protected picks. That could potentially happen to Kuzma if he continues to just have games where he pretends like he doesn't want to score. It's like ever since Lonzo left, he hasn't been the same guy. I would have rather had them kept Brandon Ingram at this point, looking at what's happening with them. And Brandon Ingram, congratulations to Brandon Ingram. Shout out to him getting the contract he got.
Getting his money. Yeah.
But outside of that, I think this Lakers team
Championship
is going to win back-to-back. They're going to win back-to-back. I told you before COVID,
Championship favorite.
the Lakers were going to win the championship. They're definitely the favorites. The Klay Thompson move, I still would have thought they're the favorites because of what happened with Kevin Durant leaving. Denver, they're gonna be up there. The Clippers are gonna be up there. The Blazers will probably make a little bit of a push. Nuggets, Jazz. I bet the Jazz can get the Jazz and Nuggets mixed up sometimes. They're going to be up there, but the Lakers are definitely the favorites.
Their biggest competition is still the Clippers, even though because I feel like the Clippers only got better getting rid of Doc Rivers. I'm not a fan of Doc Rivers either. I feel like Tyronn Lue have a better relationship with the players, which is the biggest thing that they needed. And then you improve with Ibaka over Harrell. You get more spacing and more size against the Lakers, which the Lakers, one of the biggest attributes they had last year was size. So now the Clippers have more size and they have more shooting. So, yeah, Lakers, Clippers, Western Conference Finals. And now, I feel like the Lakers can easily beat anybody out the East right now. We'd have to wait until the season starts, because the season's actually starting pretty soon, but I do feel like the Lakers got it.
Appreciate it. Jansen Harris here with Flynn Heathcliff. Thank you for joining me. This show was sponsored by Your Future Media and also Level 1 Game Room. Shout out to the UK Falcons as well, too. They show a lot of support. Check out their Instagrams and Twitter, and you'll see a lot of content from myself. And wherever you guys are listening, subscribe to this podcast. Listen to this podcast. Just Good Network everywhere. Thank you for listening. Like, comment, subscribe below. If you are on YouTube listening, Flynn, thanks again for joining me.